When I was younger, I was just in like a hurricane the whole time of just chaos and like trauma and never really understanding like what was going on with me. And then suddenly I was told, oh, you've got ADHD. And I felt so sad for that girl. Like I was like, God, I wish I could go back in time and just say to myself, like, you're okay. Like your operating system is different. I'm Jessie May Lee. I'm an actor and I have ADHD. Oh, hi.
Hello. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Okay.
Jessie May Lee, you're an actor.
I'm an actor, so you?
With ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
I know.
Shadow and Bone, big success. Huge show.
Huge show. And it was a huge thing for me to come into, like, just, you know, as a newcomer.
That's a big shift, isn't it? Because there's more attention.
I think season 1, like filming Shadow and Bone was like, oh, that's when I kind of realised I was like, oh, I've definitely got ADHD. Like being on set, you can imagine, because especially when you're like the lead of a show, you have eyes on you all the time. Like, it's not 1 minute of the day that someone isn't looking at, you know, being, where's Jessie? Like, you'd always have someone looking at you. So then I'd often get people commenting like, oh, you've got so much energy, or like, you're chatting to everyone all the time. And like, you know, I'd sit there in hair and makeup and I would have to sit there for like 1 hour, 2 hours sometimes. And I'd be there going through all of her things. And she'd have to get me, she got me a load of puzzles.
Yeah.
Like kids toys to play with while she did my hair, because I would just be...
Well, they used to have those spinners, didn't they?
Yeah, but I didn't even realise that other people didn't move around as much as I did. When I first got my diagnosis, I was 24. I had this like feeling of essentially like grief when, like, I remember I sat there, I like opened the email and I looked at the paperwork and I was like, shit, I do have ADHD. That's mad. I felt really upset because I was just thinking like, I had been so hard on myself. Like, I think as an adult, the way I am now, I'm very laid back, very outgoing. I've, you know, got my shit together. But when I was younger, I was just in like a hurricane the whole time of just chaos and like trauma and making bad decisions and like getting myself into dangerous situations and all this stuff, and never really understanding why, and never really understanding like what was going on with me. And then suddenly I was told, oh, you've got ADHD. And I felt so sad for that girl. Like, I was like, God, I wish I could go back in time and just say to myself, like, you're okay. Like, your operating system is different.
Are you happy that you were diagnosed?
I think what's really nice about getting diagnosed is that now I'm quite good at having respect for myself and being like, giving myself grace. So like when I do something wrong, or like do something that maybe I forget to call someone back, you know, and I feel really bad about it, or I miss my train or whatever it may be. In the past, I would be like, oh, for God's sake, Jessie, like, get your act together. Yeah. And it would really affect my self-esteem, my confidence. Whereas now I'm just like,
really?
Giving myself grace and letting people around me give me grace has allowed me to just be like, okay, yeah, I struggle in some of these areas, but I think it's important. When were you diagnosed? Were you a kid?
I got double diagnosed.
You got double diagnosed? Yeah. How does one get double diagnosed?
I got diagnosed in the middle of my GCSEs. And I was like, meh. And then I got re-diagnosed when I was like 25. I remember I was like on the internet, and then this thing comes up, ADHD, 30 things. How many of these do you think? And I was like, God damn, that's like my life. Yeah. Honestly, when I was younger, I was like, I didn't take it that seriously, if I'm being real. I struggled to pay attention, but I wasn't that bothered.
Yeah.
And then it was only when I got older, I had one particular experience that changed my life when I was about 22. And then I realised that there was ways I could make my life a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about school and things, because like when I was at school, I think firstly, women historically haven't been diagnosed as much. And
it shows differently, right?
Yeah, it shows up differently. And I think just the expectations that are put on us growing up is very different. And because I was smart at school, I have really good memory. I've got like a photographic memory. So school was easy. Like I could just sit there in class. I'm like, yeah, I got it. Cool. But because I did well, I would be like in the class where everyone behaved themselves. And I just remember, you know, I had a friend of mine who had ADHD. He was diagnosed when we were in primary school. And I'd say, what is it like for you? He's like, I just can't sit still. I can't focus. And I was thinking, God, I can't fucking focus. You know, I don't have that. It must be really difficult for you. But I'd be sat there and like, you probably know the feeling I'm describing. And I think if you don't have ADHD, it's difficult to understand like boredom. For me, being at school, do you ever get that like rising, like this feeling like you've got a balloon, like just expanding and you just want to scream? Like I would be sat there in class in silence. I'm being told I'm not allowed to stand up, I'm not allowed to speak to anyone, I'm not allowed to touch anything like this.
You've lost me at silence.
And I would just literally feel myself, I'd feel like this almost, I'm not a very angry person, but I'd feel like this kind of like hot, like white hot rage building. Like if I had to sit still.
This is a rational response to school.
Exactly. And like, it's crazy. And the thing is, schools don't really know, they don't have, a lot of like comprehensive schools anyway, don't have the capacity to treat everyone like an individual anyway.
Yeah.
And I was then labelled as like a naughty kid, which then obviously sent me down, you know, I'm naughty, am I? Okay. I'm going to act out, you know. And that's where I probably, had I not been sort of labelled and pushed to being like, oh, you're naughty, you're disruptive, you're this, you're that. Because I was like, I'm actually trying really hard here, and I don't understand what I'm actually doing wrong, you know. If I'd only known that I had like a different operating system, I stopped trying to push myself to be someone that I wasn't, because I've had terrible mental health issues. I've been medicated for all kinds of things, you know, things that I now know I wouldn't have been, misdiagnosed with, you know, all kinds of disorders. It was literally just that I had ADHD.
Really?
And autism. But it's like,
as a woman maybe as well.
Yeah, because they're just like, oh, you've got generalized anxiety, you've got panic disorder, you're depressed, you're anxious. It was literally just, I was just really struggling. When I finally got diagnosed, because I think for a long time I knew, I was like, this, you know, I went through all the things, you know, I went to university, but I dropped out because I struggled so much with my mental health. I absolutely hated it, which again is apparently quite typical of like neurodivergent people. You go into adulthood and suddenly you're like, oh shit, hang on. Like school, I had people sorting things out for me. I had my parents at home, whatever. Then suddenly you're living alone and you've got like rampant ADHD and you can't organize your time. So when I got my diagnosis, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Well, you really didn't know anything before that point?
No, I was pretty certain I had it, but I always had that imposter thing. You know, I think our culture is so much like, oh, just get on with it.
Yeah.
Oh, everyone's like that. Like everyone's, you know, finds it difficult to focus. Everyone gets upset. Everyone, whatever.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Has your life been easier since being diagnosed?
Definitely. Like people knowing where I struggle is really helpful, because people who love you want to help you.
Yeah.
They do want to help you. I'm someone who needed to learn to let people help me as well. And so I'll quite often find that like, okay, yeah, I struggle with organization and timekeeping. I get overwhelmed really easily. I have really bad sensory issues. Like if I'm wearing something that's scratchy, I'll be sick. You know, I have a lot of like quite intense, weird symptoms. But then I also know that the things that I am good at, my strengths, I can offer those back. I like to talk positively about ADHD a lot because I do think there's some really great aspects to it. But talking about ADHD burnout, my God, Jordan, you know, we're filming season 2. I wasn't sleeping. And then also trying to be like mum and, you know, social sec and invite everyone out and have people back to my house. But then when I was at work, you know, I love my job and I have such like outrageous energy and endurance for like being on set. But then I'd come home and again, the cycle continues, not sleeping, not eating properly. And then by the end of it, my entire system was fucked basically. I had
dysregulated
completely. I was really ill in like every aspect, so I needed time off work.
And that is partly because you felt as if your ADHD was compounding on itself.
Yeah, I was really bad at asking for help, like generally, because I think as well when you're growing up with ADHD, autism, whatever, and you constantly feel like you're messing up, it's then like, I don't know, for me, it became quite a point of like pride. Like I hated sort of having to, you know, I was like, no, I've got this, it's fine. Stop helping. Okay, I've got it, you know.
Right.
So I found it really difficult to say, hang on, I'm struggling.
Have you taken steps towards making healthier choices?
Yeah, I have a lot of like movement needs. Like they say that about children, you know, little kids who've got ADHD, you know, they have movement needs, and we have.
What do you mean movement needs?
So like, you know, you might say, I was talking to a mum recently in a cafe and she was talking about her son who's autistic, who has a lot of movement needs. And she meant that he's got so much energy, he needs to move, otherwise it comes like exploding out in other ways. And I was like, that is me. I go to the gym, I walk everywhere, like I move around a lot, because if I don't, I internalize it.
And also I think it makes me more stagnant. My ADHD is a lot easier to handle if I do exercise, when I exercise.
Yeah.
Because it kind of plateaus me.
You know, the amount of people who, you know, and it's not their fault, you know, you drive to work, you sit at your desk, you come home, you scroll on your phone.
And we sedate ourselves with our food as well.
But like when I've made the choices to only eat like whole foods and stuff, again, and I have the privilege to do that, it's life-changing.
Change your life.
You know, all of these things.
100%.
Because yeah, people say like, you know, you'll hear some uncle or something saying, oh, everyone's got ADHD nowadays. And
right.
And I go, yeah, well, of course, like just by the way that we live, you know, I'll talk to people sometimes who go, oh, I think I've got ADHD because I can't, you know, I keep getting distracted by my phone or I can't. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, of course, you might have ADHD. You might also just be a victim of today's society and like ultra processed food and screens all the time. That might just be it. You know, who knows? We all need to look after ourselves properly. But I think when you're neurodivergent, it's easy to fall into the wrong habits. And that's why I've been like really strict with myself because, you know, I've been there. I've had problems with drugs. I've had problems with all kinds of things and unhealthy habits. You know, I speak to lots of friends of mine who've got ADHD and like addictions and things like that. And, you know, dangerous behavior. Yeah, exactly. So I try to like manage that as much as possible by doing, you know, the right things, you know, eating well and exercising and stuff.
What would you say are some things that neurotypical people may not understand about your experience being neurodivergent?
I think it's important for everyone, whether you're neurotypical or not, to understand that we are all really different. You can't just like paint all neurodivergent people with a brush.
Right.
In the same way you can't with neurotypical people.
Right.
You know, there are some people who are neurotypical and they struggle with things that are, you know, might seem like ADHD, but it's not the same thing. And I think we're all so different and it's important to meet everyone on like an individual level if you can, if you've got the capacity to do so, because, you know, we've all got different needs and different like abilities. And there's always this thing, I think, when you've got ADHD, like people think you're inept or like, you know, you can't focus on anything. You can't, you know, you can't remember this, can't remember that. But actually, for myself, lots of friends of mine, students I work with, when you're doing something that you like doing,
you're just flying.
Like, you know, exactly. You can't be stopped. If you're enjoying it and you're, you know, obviously if you're enjoying something, you start to get good at it.
Yeah.
And you're in this like flow. And I think that's the thing with ADHD. And I think especially for neurodivergent people, like you grow up and you do feel like a weird alien that doesn't quite understand, like, why does this make sense to everyone else? Why is everyone else sitting quietly? Why is everyone else? And you end up masking a lot. And I think that's what happens. Like, you know, you are a kid learning to sort of copy other people and be a human being. I think putting too much expectation on other people or expecting other people to be like you is always going to end in like disappointment and frustration. I think it's important to be open to like, you know, open to someone
Jessie,
on their level.
Preach. Okay, so if somebody's considering a diagnosis, maybe thinking they're neurodivergent, you know, associating themselves perhaps with things we've mentioned, what would your advice be? I
think there's so much stigma about getting a diagnosis because lots of people think, you know, they've read online, oh, you know, I don't want to be, you know, just jumping on the bandwagon. I don't want to, you know, everyone to think I'm just being, oh, I'm ADHD because it's trendy. And I know so many people who've put off getting help because they don't want to seem like,
really?
Oh, I'm jumping on a bandwagon or, you know, like, oh, everyone's like that. I do think, let's say you've seen things online and it resonates with you and makes sense and you've gone through your life feeling like a lot of the stuff that you're feeling is debilitating and has harmed you. Because, yeah, you can go through life and be ADHD and be happy as Larry. But, yeah, if you're like a uni student studying law and you've got ADHD and you're so stressed all the time, again, give yourself grace. Listen to your body. Like, respect yourself. And the worst thing that can happen is, you know, that you are in a long waiting list or you don't get your diagnosis. But I also do think, like, self-diagnosis is actually really legit. And for so many people, they can't afford, you know, the time or the money to get diagnosed. So I think, like, if it resonates with you and it's a framework, like, okay, I've got ADHD or I've got autism, and therefore these are things I need to do. If you self-diagose that, that's fine. Yeah, in my opinion, that's important. Like,
there are resources available that don't involve anything clinical. It's just behavioral shifts.
And if it just really helps you, like if you think, okay, yeah, if I tell myself, yeah, I've got ADHD and these things help me and improve my life, then by all means, like all power to you, I think. So just, I don't want anyone to ever feel that they shouldn't pursue it because they're worried about, you know, like just, oh, am I just doing this? You know, you're only going to find out whether or not you have it. And if you don't, great. And if you do, great, you know. But at the end of the day, you're great how you are. That's all I have to say.
Anyway, Jessie, congratulations.
Thank you.
You are doing the whole neurodivergence thing very well. No, honestly, congratulations on your career so far, and thank you for sharing your experience.
Yeah, congratulations to you for writing a book.
Oh yeah,
I wouldn't even get to say that, but like,
thank you.
Sorry, ADHD, and you wrote a book. Like,
that process. Listen, I'll tell you what. You can interview me about that process another time.
Next time,
because that was a whole 73,000 words. You know. mad. Anyway,
That's
I'll
amazing.
talk to you about it after. All right, well, it's been a pleasure. Big love.
Pleasure.